Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Oneness Junkie podcast, hosted by me, Lydia Smith, a self-proclaimed Oneness Junkie. Oneness Junkie is a place to be inspired, encouraged, and supported. Learn from the individuals who are working to make the world a better place. Let's meet today's guest. Hi, everybody. It's Lydia. And today I'm sitting here again with Gib Broadhead. Hi, Gib.
Hi, Lydia.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Awesome. Okay, guys, we have to confess. This is so funny. We got on the Zoom about an hour ago to kind of catch our thoughts around talking about the topic of insecurities, which is the topic for today. And so we're giggly right now because we did not want to be insecure talking about insecurities. So we had to get it all out. we actually experienced some of the things we'll be talking about today. And so it's really good. I think we're all hashed out, and I think we're ready to go to bring a fun and difficult conscious conversation to you all. And hopefully we can provide some, ideas and thoughts and insights to help you think through your own thoughts on this subject. What do you think, Gib? What are you thinking about?
Well, yeah, insecurities. It was funny. We were talking earlier and even our own insecurities were coming up before we even started talking about insecurities. It's even, you bring up the word and it's like, oh my God, I've got that one and this one and that one. And you start thinking about them and focusing on them and
feeling them,
And some of them can be quite strong sometimes. So, which is really one of the purposes of why we're doing this podcast today.
Right. Why we think it's an important subject to talk about. And I will share that when Gib and I were picking topics, we both like this one. And the reason is because we both have personal experiences where we felt, insecure. So it's like, okay, I can talk about that. That's an easy subject, right?
Right. Yeah, we've got some experience there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to talk about insecurities, and we're going to talk about like all the different kinds of insecurities that are out there. Hopefully we don't miss that many, but feel free to write in and tell us about any that came up for you that we missed, that we didn't, think of. And, we just feel like it's an important topic. And we also want to kind of conclude the episode by talking about how to, if there's any areas of insecurity that you're feeling, how to build up security in those areas that you're feeling uncomfortable in or insecure in. And so we're just going to come from our personal opinions and our personal perspective. And one of the things that's so great about the Gib and Lydia conversations is we come from different perspectives. And so we're kind of like at both ends of the spectrum, and we can bring, that conversation alive on, many different levels, because Gib and I have our differences and we have our similarities, which makes it kind of fun to have the dialogue. So I always enjoy having those conversations with you.
Yeah, me too.
Good. Yeah, it's eye-opening, right? Because I don't always think the way you think, and you help me think in new ways. So thank you for sharing this time with me, this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
Do you have anything you want to share or say before we dive into, is there anything that's coming up for you that I want to give you the floor if there's anything you want to say?
Sure. I mean, this can be a touchy subject for people. And so I think in listening to this podcast, try to keep an open mind. We're going to talk about, we're going to point things out about generalities about other people. We're going to point out some things about ourselves that we might feel a little insecure about. And the reason for that is vulnerability. It's important to be vulnerable about these things. Lydia was pointing this out to me earlier. You have to be open about these things and comfortable in your own skin, even if it's not very comfortable. There's gold on the other side of this if you can show and speak your truth. So, it's important to stay focused on that, to stay focused on the outcome. The whole purpose of this isn't to diagnose and pick out all your insecurities. The purpose of this is to heal them.
Yeah, it is about healing. And that's really one of the main themes of the podcast in general, is that I'm always bringing topics that can help people heal areas of their lives that they want to heal. I mean, no one's going to heal unless you want it. So this is only for those who want it,
Right.
And I would like to say, in regards to that your vulnerability is something that helps to build confidence when you are vulnerable and you're comfortable in vulnerability. I know Brene Brown, wrote a whole book about it. I think it was Dare to Lead is the actual title of the book. But by being vulnerable, it really can provide you a sense of freedom. And freedom is like the experience that I think most people desire to be
it's like
free.
the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Free with your thoughts, free with your feelings, free with how you live your life and express yourself. And when you're vulnerable and you're comfortable in your own vulnerability, actually when you're comfortable with your vulnerability, then you can allow others to be comfortable when they're expressing their vulnerabilities, and you recognize it. There's an opportunity to see vulnerability in others when you identify it in yourself. So we're going to talk
about one of Esther Hicks's laws,
probably
law of allowing.
Yeah.
Law of allowing. And I think that comes in, mainly with your relationships, because if you're not allowing yourself to be yourself, or you're so uncomfortable about how you feel that you're trying to control the way someone else feels, then that's something that needs to be addressed.
Well, and when people who really hold their freedom important, when they can feel their freedom closing in on them from like someone else, you feel it. You feel the constraints when the constraints are put on by others. We'll get into more anecdotal stories, but that reminds me of a recent thing that happened to me that I can share later. I'll write that one down and bring that one up later about how someone else's constraints, was affecting, my relationship with them. So, are you good? Are you complete with all your thoughts? Because I want to dive into the beginning. Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
So let's talk about, to start the conversation off, will you share a little bit about, bring the chakras in a little bit, just at least the ones that relate to security? Will you share with the audience about where security lies in the different chakras? Or
Sure.
even, can you actually explain real quick what the chakras are so that people who've never heard of a chakra knows what we're talking about?
Sure. There's 7 energy centers. They start around the waist and they move all the way up to the crown of your head. The root, the sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, mind's eyes, your forehead, and then the crown. And the root is where, some of the like emotional connections you hold in the root would be your needs for safety, your needs for security, the idea of feeling grounded. Those are all sexuality and fear. Fears around money,
feeling
safety, right? All those, typically most of your insecurities will lie down in that root chakra. They can move up to the sacral and navel. I mean, really, they can move through most of your chakras, but usually it's the heart and lower is where most of your insecurities lie in the chakras. So, we're not going to get into like how you can help yourself with this, but when you're able to view your chakras and look at them, they're always a key indicator as to what's actually happening with you. Is it, as far as, so that's one of the things like I'll do in an assessment, I'll check your chakras because that points me to where the healing needs to go. The sacral, the next layer up above the root, just right around the stomach area. It's about intimacy. It's about letting go, emotional needs, your desires. And then in the solar plexus, it's more about efficiency and purpose, your willpower. That's where most of your anger lies in your solar plexus chakra. And then the heart, of course, it's almost self-explanatory. It's like, you have an open heart or is your heart closed off? An open heart is healthy expression. It's showing love, having balance, your coping skills. So those are some of the emotional connections with the lower chakras.
Right. And having balance in all those areas, kind of the key to being able to manage.
Yes.
So the job, does that fall in the root when you're insecure in your job and your home?
Right. Yeah. Physical safety and money is around the root. And, a lot of us, or some of us can feel that way. I mean, I know you had a recent experience with moving. Mm-hmm. Those issues tend to be centered around the root chakra.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into some insecurities. And speaking of that segue, I'll just start off with a quick story to help people kind of recognize, like, there's just different areas of insecurities. I think that Gib and I, in our first hour before we were recording, we were talking more about personal self insecurities, where, it's more about your internal feelings about yourself and your relationships, which are, I feel like those are like the harder insecurities to like look at and to feel. But I want to bring it to a different type of insecurity, like job insecurity. Like if you don't have a job, that's a really scary place for most people. If you don't have a home to go to, that's like a really scary place. Like fear of homelessness is a scary place. And so I was telling Gib that this past month, my landlord at my other house, which, by the way, I loved where I lived. It was awesome. I'd lived there for 2 years and I really didn't have any intention of moving, but he wanted to sell the house. So he was forcing me out and he was nervous. He had his insecurities about getting the house on the market quickly and selling it during the prime area. So his pressure on me was palpable. The way he spoke to me, the way he was like not flexible, I felt all that. And that created a sense of insecurity in me because I felt rushed to have to find a place. I didn't have the ability to say, can I have one more month? Because I haven't found a place. He was literally like pushing me out to try to get his house on the market as fast as possible. So I felt it, I felt the way he was talking to me and treating me. And so then that contributed to my already insecurity because I'm very particular about where I want to live and what kind of house I want to live in the neighborhood. In fact, I had like I live in the 4th largest city in the United States, but I had a 2-mile radius of where I was willing to find a rent house. And so that put my own constraints on me, like I made it tighter. And so anyway, I don't want to go through too much of a story, but basically I was in a very scary place because I had to get out. I didn't know where I was going and I hadn't found a place where I could feel settled, that I liked. And so I ended up looking at like 5 different places. And when this house that I moved into just March 1st popped up on the market, I saw it in one day, told my realtor, I want to see it, knew instantly when I walked through it that I wanted it. It felt right. I'm actually, one of the things I was telling Gib is that I used to walk through my house at my other place and say, I love where I live. I love where I live. And I believe in the power of manifestation. And I wanted that vibration of energy to spill over into the next place that I lived. So I used to say this or something better. And so the beauty of my story, and I'm wrapping it up, is that I actually found, like within 15 days of me having to move, so it was a really scary time, but I found something better and I'm happier in my new place. And it was a big lesson in following my belief system, because my belief system says, have faith. The universe has your back. You know, things are always working out for me. These are the things I tell myself. And so even though I say those things, when you have the job and you have a home, you don't have to practice believing in your faith. But when you are challenged with the opportunity to believe in your faith, then that's when the rubber meets the road. And I luckily.
Right. And as soon as someone is challenged, like, because sooner or later you're going to be challenged somehow, like all of us are. And so, use the power of intention to work through your insecurity. Use that as your foundation to work through something that was really scary for you.
It gave me something to hold on to.
It gave you something to hold on to. And that's the key, right? So it's okay to feel insecure about it, but what are you going to fall back on? What is it that you have to fall back on? We're talking about this before we started recording about, the dude or the lady, driving down the road in their Ferrari, what are they overcompensating for? But even that is an insecurity, because that in a way is a judgment, right? You don't know their story. You don't know why they're driving a Ferrari. They could be the most confident, kick-ass person on the planet, and they happen to like driving a Ferrari and happen to have a lot of money. And, so that insecurity would move back to, what is it about, do you have a thing about money? Do you have a thing about nice things, like being vulnerable about these things and having that foundation to fall back on are key.
And as long as your security that you feel is not in the object, in this case, we use the example of the Ferrari. As long as your security is not in the Ferrari and it's in yourself, that's when driving the Ferrari is no big deal, because if he wrecks it and he no longer has it and he has to drive a Prius, and he's just as confident in his Prius as he is his Ferrari or she, then that's the authentic confidence that, security that we're, all wanting to achieve for ourselves. Right.
Right. That's exactly.
So, okay. So that was just a story about home and, job. So let's talk about other forms of insecurity. Like what comes to mind for you, Gib?
Oh, I have one. Okay. And this one's around, I guess it's around relationships. So I've been kind of, sequestered myself through COVID. And even before that, wasn't really going out very much. And I should be, because that's how I get my cup filled. And so what I noticed is when I was going out occasionally, I was getting social anxiety. And so the other night I went out with my girlfriend, Jamie, went to a restaurant. And when we got there, like I shifted and I felt different and I felt uncomfortable. And I didn't want to name it because, I just was like, oh, I'll just kind of push through this. So we're sitting up at the the bar getting some food, and she could tell that it was uncomfortable. And she's like, look, I'm just going to say this. It feels uncomfortable right now. Why does this feel uncomfortable? And I stopped and my heart started pounding, because I started thinking about why I was actually uncomfortable. And when I said it, I said the words, I'm uncomfortable because I have social anxiety right now. That's why I'm uncomfortable. And when I said that, I started, like, my heart started beating really fast, and I passed out. I passed out from it. And I had surgery the week before, and I had some pain pills a couple days before to get through the pain or whatever. So I know that contributed to it, right?
Yeah.
But the end result was, this was an insecurity of mine, and when I named it, it was kind of very shocking to me. It's like shocked my system. But the point is that it needed to be named, because I don't know if I had actually spoken those words before, admitted to myself that I even had social anxiety. I was like, you do the whole, like, for me at least, it's like that American male thing. You got to be tough, you got to be strong, and you got to be powerful, and don't show any weakness. And and so some little thing about going out to a restaurant makes me feel insecure, right? So like when I said the words, it like I felt, it felt relief, but it also was like kind of a big moment for me, So it felt good to kind of push through that. Now I'm forcing myself to go out. I'm making myself go out, and when I do, it's like I feel a little bit of that coming up. But as I kind of push through, I start just having a good time and know it's fine.
What happened? I know you said you went to South by Southwest. What happened when you went out to that? Were you feeling your feelings?
Yeah. So, I rode
That's
my bike.
That's a lot of people.
I rode my bike over to Auditorium Shores from my house. It's like just a couple miles from here down the bike path. It was great. So I had this like nice transition. I met up with my friends. I feel very safe with them. And there was one moment where we were just surrounded by people everywhere. And I was looking around going, damn, man, COVID and whatever, I think it's mainly COVID, it's like, I was so used to kind of trying to quote, keep myself safe and, but I'm vaxxed and boosted. And I just decided, there's no reason why I shouldn't feel comfortable here right now. So I just started thinking about things that felt good. It's like at some point, the more you know what your insecurities are, most of us can name all of them really. And if you haven't named them yet, you probably should, because you should know what they are, because that's when you know how to deal with them when they come up.
Yeah. Yeah. So how you felt okay in that big crowd? I mean, because I know energy of others has been a thing for you. Like, did you do your protection and all that?
Yeah, like I'll do my bubbles and do that whole thing. And yeah, I mean, I can go out, and if I wanted to, I could sit there and look at one person and like tell you their life story. Seriously, I could go to the next one and do that and that and that and that. So if I walked out there just wide open, it'd just be sensory overload for me. So, I'm maybe more in tune about connection and energy than some other people. So maybe it's more of an intense feeling for me, but I've used techniques and my tools to help me, handle those things.
Yeah. And put some barriers between you and all that energy.
Some healthy boundaries. Yeah.
Being a HSP, which means highly sensitive person, I also, somebody asked me, do you want to go to the rodeo? And I just said, no, I don't want to go to the rodeo. I grew up in Houston. I've been to the rodeo. I know what the rodeo is and how it feels. And I'm just not in a place where I want to be around that energy. And so I think sometimes you just check in with yourself and you decide where you're at. And if the experience is going to be worth, sometimes there's a sacrifice of your energy.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to make a decision. And, I typically check in, quote, I'll ask spirit if it's a good idea for me to go out or not. I ask those questions. And if I get a no, I won't go out. I have to be careful with that, because I was getting
yeah. You have to decide if that's spirit or Gib talking.
Right. You don't want to be led by your insecurities. You don't want to make decisions based off fear. You don't want to check in with spirit when you're in a fearful mood, because you're not going to get accurate information. When you're in fear and in your insecurities, you're not going to get your the correct guidance, the full guidance, the real guidance, maybe because either you're not receiving the messages right, or you're misinterpreting them, or part of it's true and the other part isn't. So, working through your insecurities leads to a better connection. It leads to a better feelings as well, because you're making healthy choices.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up the concept that there are people, including myself, that can have a lot of confidence in different areas of our lives. I'll just give some examples. Like, you can be the CEO of a company, or you can be the president of the United States, or you could be really good at your job and have been doing really good for 30 years or 15 years or whatever, and have a lot of confidence in certain areas of your life. And then there can be other areas of your life that are like more of a challenge. And I'm just going to venture to say, again, everything that we talk about is our own personal opinions that we're sharing out there. But I would say that those are external to you, the job, the career, raising a family. Like, maybe you had babies and raised a family really well, had, what's considered a great bunch of kids, and you're super confident in your parenting skills. Those are all, in my opinion, those are external to us and ourselves. But what is an internal, security or insecurity are the things that drive the relationships, right? That create the space to be like a healthy human being contributing in a relationship dynamic with another human being. And I remember, I think it was Brene Brown one time said that we were brought to, like, our whole purpose in life is to connect and to relate to others. Like, without that, life would not be as fulfilling and as joyful. And so if connecting with others becomes challenging, you might consider, finding areas in your life that needs healing, for you to have more joy, have more connection. Just like we were talking about, like going out and being around people, you said it fills your cup,
Right.
being out instead of being alone. Right. And so I want to turn we all know that, you, like I said, you can be super good at, running companies and running businesses, but you're a horrible at, interpersonal relationships with, your spouse, for instance. Right. And you have you're really uncomfortable in that department. And so are you comfortable turning the conversation more on an internal dialogue about what do we understand about internal personal insecurities? So, Gib and I were talking, and we all we're all growing, we're all evolving. So, we have stories and times and situations and past relationships and loved ones, and whether it's family or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a spouse, we have all these memories and experiences where, oh, I think I could have done that one better, or I wish I felt more comfortable, more confident in that relationship, so those are the ones that I think are the most challenging, to deal with. And just being in a relationship with someone, it's interesting. Like, let's talk about what makes people, and I can share from my own experience, but what makes people insecure in relationships. I'm going to use an example. Long time ago, many, over 20 years ago, I had a boyfriend, and I had graduated from college. So I had a college degree, and he didn't have a college degree. But he lied to me about having a college degree. And we were talking about we were young. We were talking about the potential of being together forever, like marriage. But what was more of a problem for me was not that he didn't have a college degree. It was that he lied about it. I couldn't see myself marrying a guy who could lie to me in the beginning of a relationship. Like, I had no trust. That the trust was more important than his perception of the untruth that he needed to tell me, because he never thought I would figure it out, that I would find out. And he didn't know who he was dealing with.
He had no idea.
I found out. And then he was like, when did you become a fucking PI? I'll never forget that line.
Well, it's like, I think it's the turnoff when your partner's insecure, especially when they're not being vulnerable about it, right? So if he would have just said, hey, I don't have a degree, I don't feel good about that, and I might even feel jealousy about you, Lydia, because you have a degree. And so I'm comparing, my smarts with your smarts, and you feel smarter than me. And so, and that's why I feel insecure. But really, where's that insecurity actually come from? Most likely it's something from the past, his mom or dad or whatever situation that he might have been in. But really the key, like, maybe none of that matters. Like, most of the time it's good to know why, right? But I think we spend way too much time figuring out the whys instead of focusing on what we actually want, what we actually need. And the most important part of that relationship with you, was trust. And he broke the trust right in the beginning.
Which ruined the whole thing. I mean, like, once the trust was broken, it ruined it for me forever.
Right. And now if he would have come back and said, well, Lydia, okay, full disclosure, I'm insecure about the fact that I didn't go to college. It didn't feel good to me. And so I thought if I lied to you, it would make things better. So, like, if he came back and said something. Well,
he did say that. He said that I lied to you because I didn't think you'd date me if you knew the truth.
Well, that's even different. That's just explaining another insecurity that he has, right? Like, that's not being vulnerable. That's just explaining a second insecurity.
Justification. That's justifying why he lied because of my belief system.
Right. So, like, but if he came back and actually was vulnerable to you and was fully, then maybe the relationship could have worked out in a different way. I'm not saying it would have, but what I am saying is, he had a chance. He made a mistake, but there's a chance to push that, get that car back off the, off the bumps, back onto the road, where there's smooth driving. And, the bumps were the warning sign. And so I guess my point is about this is that the more vulnerable you can be about why you're feeling insecure, especially to your partner, the closer you guys are going to become. And if you are being vulnerable with them and being fully authentic, and they still don't want to talk to you, or they don't like that, then that's their decision. That doesn't have anything to do with you. So you can speak your mind and move on with your day.
Yeah, agree. Do you have anything you want to share? Because I want to give you the opportunity to share something, because I have another story, a different topic. So what do you want to share?
Well, I guess just, I guess my thought is that, maybe we're starting to get into, what can your foundational beliefs be? Where do those need to be as far as your insecurities go? Where do you, when you're feeling insecure, what do you fall back to? Right? Where do we fall back to? And, for me, it's like, is how I value myself. How I view the words I choose to view myself with, being vulnerable when you are feeling that way, because everyone has insecurities about something. We do. All of us do. So, those are the things that I like to fall back on to help me when I feel that way. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that in there.
Well, and communication to me is like, I like to call it a superpower, because when you can communicate authentically, like how you feel and what's really going on for you, which is what you were describing earlier when in the story, you were giving examples of how he could have done it differently. That can help clear whatever is lingering and, like the smog, the fog that's hovering over you about whatever the story you're making up about how you're feeling based on what's going on in the relationship or the dynamic. It's like communication is so powerful in that instance, and really like staying with it when it's uncomfortable. You see how that kind of works. If it's not comfortable, is it, to go through that?
No, it's not. Like for me, it's like I feel like I'm starting to be encased in a block of ice. Like that's what it feels like. And it's like there's a numbing feeling. There's like a pressure that comes in. And it's strong sometimes, really strong. And, but sometimes, that illusion, that ice block around you, all it takes is a little chisel and one little hammer, just bink, and it just can
shatters.
All
like
of it.
like that picnic table glass that shattered. Remember we had that story where we talked about you sat on one, or you put an ice bucket on one time and it just shattered into a million pieces.
Yeah, it just exploded into a million pieces.
Yeah, that happened with me this past like 6 months ago. My umbrella popped up into the table and it just shattered into a million pieces. I was like, why does it do that? Gosh. But it was good. It was in big shards of glass that those little pieces can't hurt you,
Right, exactly. It's a good analogy, right? So you're thinking glass breaking, oh, it's going to be even worse. But really all it does is it's just pulling a barrier away. It doesn't serve anybody.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about because I want people to be able to identify when, someone they're in a relationship with, or maybe in a behavior that they find themselves doing, like how insecurities show up, and I'm going to use some examples of things, recently that I've experienced in relationships. One is somebody I was in a long-term relationship with someone and they didn't want me to like meet somebody that like they didn't like that person for no reason. They didn't even know the person, but they didn't like their person, their image of themselves on social media. And I ended up thinking what the person was doing was pretty cool. So I went and met them. And when that person found out that I met that person, like the friendship was over for that person. Like with me, they were like, oh, you went and befriended that person. Well, we're over, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore. So, so how does insecurity show up? Manipulation, control, constraints, projections, conditions. Like in order for me to be in a relationship with you, I need to behave the way you need me to behave for it to be okay, like for us to continue. So to me, that is extreme insecurity. It's so immature of this other person. In my opinion, they were they're not only insecure, but they're very immature in relationships, because the more developed you become in relationships, you realize that you need to allow people to be who they are and like be comfortable with that. And, or don't like, you don't have to be comfortable with it. So maybe you don't want to be in a relationship with that person. That's okay too, but make a decision. But when the other person, like I'm the recipient of the experience. And as I felt those walls getting smaller and smaller, like in order for me to be friends with you, I have to be loyal to you by your standards of loyalty. It reminds me of the Trump era stuff when Trump used to say, like, if you're not loyal, if you're not for me and loyal to me, then you're against me, right. And it's like that control is not like mature or love. And it's definitely not secure.
No, and it's not healthy either.
No, it's
Healthy
not. And
behavior.
so like losing a relationship like that was okay because it just highlighted that I was having to manipulate myself to be in relationship with this person. They moved themselves away out of it, which was fine, you know?
Right. Right.
Because I was
Yeah.
just trying to be generous and be like giving them the benefit of the doubt, like, oh, they're, emotionally immature. But that's not why I'm gonna like leave somebody.
Right. No, I mean you wouldn't move away from somebody just because of that. But, I think, you know, like our role here, or my role and your role, I think, has always been to um, help people connect with themselves. And so, the more we can connect with ourselves, the more we can connect with other people, the more understanding we have about who we are and why we're insecure about certain things will allow us to be more authentic. And, one thing with me is like, I think in the past, I've gotten so focused on what my insecurities are that I haven't spent enough time, focusing on what I'm good at, or, or why, or just saying the reason why I'm feeling insecure in order to work through it. Maybe that's the most important thing. It's tough. As an older American male, it is one of the most closed off, you know, the whole concept that we have is very closed. It's very constricted. And I don't like, that's not me. That's not who I am. And so, I've in the past have tried to put myself in that box, and every time I do, nothing good ever happens. And then when I put myself in the box, I start trying to put other people in the box as well. And that's never going to work either. So, it took a lot of hard lessons in the past for me and a lot of focus. But now, like, I'm not saying that I still don't have insecurities, because I do, but I know what they are now. And so, and now I think really the shift for me was when I was able to just say them in the moment. So when I feel it, I can just say it in the moment, instead of, a lot of times what I would do is not say anything. And then what that does is it builds up resentment and discord and projection and a bunch of reasons why, that it's somebody else's problem. But really, when it comes to your insecurities, it's really all about, you. Now, you can be in a toxic relationship, right? There's instances where you can be with a partner that is truly trying to undermine you. And that's the part that I think a lot of people get stuck with. They're like, well, wait a minute, is this person, a narcissist? Am I with a narcissist? So like, it doesn't really matter what I do. They're going to just turn everything around. Right. So like, the key there is to make sure that you're confident enough in yourself to be able to discern what the relationship really is.
Right. In education, like I'm a big giver. And so I attracted a lot of narcissistic relationships in my life. And I actually would have categorized my own father as having some tendencies of narcissism because, like as a child, you would think that the parents are supposed to put the child as the priority in raising them. And really, I always felt like he was the priority and that my situation didn't matter. I mean, that's just the way I felt, whether that was intentional or not. I don't really know. It might have been just lack of maturity or something on his part from his own pain and his own unresolved and unhealed pain, is where I categorize that behavior. But what it did is it set me up for really comfortable in that position. And so I attracted other takers. And so I had to read a book. I read a book called Help, I'm in Love with a Narcissist. And it took me to educate myself and to understand through like the book and the education, how to identify it. So like in the past, since I read that book, some people would show up in my life like to potentially date. And as soon as I saw the behaviors that I knew were identifiable as that characteristic trait, I was like, I'm not interested in going there anymore. I'd rather be single. I'd rather be alone than to sacrifice myself again. You know, like I'm the one responsible for me and my happiness. And you can't, when you're in a relationship with someone, you cannot blame other people for your unhappiness because you're the one making the decisions about your life.
Right. And you should be ecstatic with that person and feel ecstatic without them. Right. Like that's the goal. So, you know, if they're, you know, if it's a great fit, that's amazing. If it's not a good fit and you move away, that's amazing too. Like, you know, you were able to, you know, you were able to identify your, you know, these insecurities from the past, you know, based on, you know, growing up with your dad, to be able to see the newer relationships that came into your life and say, okay, I have this solid, healthy foundation, and I'm not going to base my, you know, relationship with someone off of fear. So I'm not going to, you know, you based it off your stability and your security about who you are as yourself
and what I deserve
and what you
know,
deserve.
like, cause I hear people complaining about their relationships and I'm like, well, do something about it. Like you're the one in control. You're the one who gets to decide if you stay or go. So stop complaining and do something, change it. If you're really that unhappy. The problem is some people are so insecure in themselves that they don't have the strength to leave a situation, right? We were talking about that earlier.
Yes, that can happen to, I mean, I'm sure that's happened to most of us at some point or another, right? We've been in a relationship that we probably need to get out of, but we can't because we feel insecure about it.
Right. You know? Which is why it's so important to invest in yourself to help build up the foundational strength of self-confidence so you have freedom, because you and I were talking in the first hour that wasn't recorded, and I was saying that when you're in that relationship that you don't want to be in, it's bondage. Remember, I was saying it's bondage, and that is not freedom. Like what we were you and I were saying earlier, it's all about your freedom. This whole life is about creating and manifesting freedom for yourself, right?
Yeah, and don't get, you know, use the listeners, don't get freedom mixed up with just being alone, right? You can feel free and have a partner that feels free, and you guys can come together as a couple and still feel free.
Right.
Like that is allowed in a healthy relationship. In fact, that is the foundation of a healthy relationship.
Right. Feeling free in spite of it. You know, another thing I wanted to talk about, you know, when we're talking about ways that insecurities show up is I was having a text communication with someone one time, and they expressed to me, they're like, I was honest with you and vulnerable, and now I'm sorry that I was. And I recognized in that moment, in that statement, that person felt so powerless. That statement was such a powerless statement and an extreme insecurity statement. And the reason is because you are not honest with others for them. You are honest with others for yourself, because that's where confidence is built. When you can hold yourself in a high level of integrity and you maintain your integrity. And we were talking earlier about vulnerability. Vulnerability builds confidence, actually. So when you have that vulnerability, know that is a building block to help you build your self-confidence. Know that it's one of the components. So let's talk about some other pieces of foundational components that build confidence and security in yourself. And we're talking about authentic self-confidence, not confidence that comes from ego-related confidence. And that's just to put it into perspective, like something that's typically outside of you, like an object or a person or anything that's external to you that you put your confidence in is in my opinion, like an ego-based confidence. What we're talking about here to build real authentic confidence is when it's an intrinsic experience from an internal perspective, has nothing to do with anyone from the outside. So what comes to mind for you, Gib, what builds confidence?
Well, one sort of visualization technique that I like to use is I will put myself, when I'm feeling insecure about something, I try to like take away everything. So, I'll put myself in a room where there's just a chair in it. Imagine myself in that room with just a chair. And then I'll think about why I'm feeling the way I feel. And the way that I've been able to work through that is by naming the thing, by saying, for me at least, because it's harder, I have a little bit more trouble self-expressing sometimes about my own story. Like that's where I have to push through. So some people, you're really good at self-expressing, like you're talking about earlier, like the steam sort of slowly coming out all the time. You've learned how to do that and handle that really well. So that's part of what I'm working on, and when I feel that way. And so, I like to go, for me, it's about, a sense of knowing, a sense of understanding. So if I know why I'm feeling the way I feel and I name it, and then I can say, what I think about the topic. So if I'm having a conversation, with my partner, I can just say what I feel without, any self-judgment, without any, with saying it in complete truth, without any sort of hesitation. My thing was sometimes I would overthink it. So, and sometimes you just have to start just saying the words, just letting those words out and knowing that it's going to be okay. And it's okay for you to say these things, even if it doesn't feel good in the moment, even if it might not feel good for the other person, you still, need to say the words.
Yes. And I think it's important too, to note in this conversation that you should make sure you have friends in your life that you can be self-expressed with and that they can handle it. They can handle your self-expression, because that's the one way that you're able to get through the fear of self-expression, is by being able to say like the worst thing you think possible, and they can handle it. They can get through it. They can help you, hold your hand and get through it, because you need practice and you need people in your life who are comfortable with you practicing your personal growth. And it feels good when you find those people, because, and they're rare, it's not common, to find. I mean, it depends on what circles you're, surrounding yourself with. But I just think it's so important to find those people that your self-expression is not uncomfortable for them.
Right. So maybe to be like specific about an example of how I was dealing with my insecurities. So, I use those visualization techniques, but like a very specific example was a couple of weeks, I passed out at this restaurant a few weeks ago. I went out with my friends about a week ago, just to meet them at a restaurant to grab dinner. And I went there and was like, well, I was, and I just said how I felt. I was like, I'm feeling a little social anxiety, but I'm really glad that I'm here. And we had the best conversation, and it was really connected and felt really good. And everybody shared their stories about, the things that were happening with them. And, I was like, this is exactly what I needed. And so that was another way for me, like you were saying, you need to surround yourself with those people. I'm fortunate enough to have friends like that. you included. So, it's nice to have those things. It's an extremely important outlet, because another thing that we tend to do when we get insecure is to close ourselves off, try to hide those things, not talk about them, pretend like they don't exist. And really, again, we talked about the pressure cooker. It's gonna explode at some point.
Yeah. And what's neat is when you have someone in your life that cares about you and they can see you going in like the tunnel of your own making. And if they can, drop the line down the well to you to help pull you out. I mean, it's a beautiful part of being in healthy relationships when people can throw you the lifeline or can throw you the life preserver of your own making, So the other thing I wanted to bring up as far as what helps with building your sense of security in yourself is I was telling Gib that I wrote this down earlier this week when I had the thought, and the statement, the quote goes, no one cares about your truth more than you should. And the reason that is so powerful is because we are so afraid to share our real thoughts and our real truth because we're afraid of what other people are going to think about it. But really, we need to care. This is what builds confidence and sense of self. We need to care about our truth more than we care about what other people think about it. And the truth is that I'm trying to express is that people don't care as much as you think they do. They're so worried about themselves and their own stuff. They're not putting that much time and energy in your stuff. And if they are, they're probably not that healthy.
Focusing on people's problems.
But when you kind of put things into context, like we get frozen because we're so worried about what other people think. And the truth is that you need to care about what you need to do for yourself more than worry about what other people think. So you're your biggest cheerleader. You're your biggest fan. I mean, you should be. Like, if you're not, that's something to look at. That these are things that build sense of self. The other thing I wrote down is, when you speak your truth and you uphold high integrity and you keep your word, you're not doing that for the recipient. You do that for you. This is what builds a sense of self. This is what builds confidence. When you tell people the truth, you're doing that for you. You're not doing it for them. When you don't cheat on them, your spouse, you're doing that for you. You're not doing it to them. You're choosing to have your sense of integrity because you care about what you think of you. These are the decisions that you make that build your sense of self. When you avoid things, when you avoid communication, when you avoid conversations, it's all in an effort to protect your insecurities. Start communicating, start being vulnerable, start opening up, because that's where the freedom lies.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly right. That's where the freedom is.
Yeah.
And you want to be careful. You don't want to start, going into defensiveness or anger, right? Because those tend to cover up the insecurities. So if you're feeling those things when you're trying to self-express, then maybe, we need to take a step back and check in first before we start expressing those things, especially in relationship, right? Because there's a tendency to, focus on, you mentioned it earlier, how other people make you feel. And in the truest sense, that should be irrelevant. It shouldn't matter what, how other people think about you or what they do. It's how you feel about yourself. Now, that doesn't mean people can do whatever they want to you. I'm not down with that at all. And that just comes back to your self-confidence, having the confidence to be okay with making someone else uncomfortable because you need to self-express.
Right. And you do it for you. And also, like, you and I have always talked about boundaries. You have to have your boundaries. You have to maintain your boundaries. Other people don't know what your boundaries are, but you have to have the power of communication in order to express, what your truth is in relationship to those boundaries,
Right.
know? So this topic is not easy, is it, Gib?
No, it's not. It's not an easy thing to talk about. And, if you're listening to this, I'm excited for you, because it means that you're willing to make changes. Like, if you're able to sit through this and listen to this and, hear things that we might be triggering in you that you don't feel that good about, but you're able to push through it. That's a good sign.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say, I think you're basically saying, like, if you've made it to the end of this topic, you're already winning.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not an easy topic. And it shows up in so many ways. It's interesting. I made a post on my Instagram. Here's a plug. My Instagram's Oneness Junkie, if you want to go follow me. And Gibbs is Gib-ogram, 2 B's. I made a post the other day, and I said, insecurities kill relationships. And they really do. It's so, number one, it's exhausting to be in relationship with a lot of insecurities. It's tough. And those who hang in there for it, really care about you and really love you. And until they don't, until they just can't do it anymore, so one of the things that I think is important to note is what I like to say is, when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. And when we heal ourselves, we heal our relationships. And the investment that you make, whether it's like hiring somebody like Gib to work on these areas, buying a book, taking an online class, taking a workshop, it's all an investment in yourself. And if you don't do that, you'll pay in your relationships. Yep. And you may not be able to keep Harville Hendrix wrote a book, Keeping the Love You Find. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with, you may find the love of your life, but if you're not up to speed with the person you think is the love of your life, that love of your life may not be willing to go through the pain of having to get you up to speed to the relationship. And so I really highly recommend people invest in themselves if they want a better life of freedom and confidence and security and joy and happiness. It requires work. It doesn't just happen. You have to do the work, but you need a guide or someone a lot of times to help bounce off, the ideas and the fears and the stuff that comes up. You need someone to help guide you there. Right. So
yeah, you need
that's for those of you who don't know, that's how I found Gib. Like, we became friends afterwards, but I actually found him and hired him for his coaching. And we worked on certain areas, and luckily I'm having some progress in those areas. So that's fun. But it's just, I can't express enough. I mean, you did a lot of workshops and stuff too, like with the work you did with becoming an intuitive. So what do you have to say about that as we wrap up the episode?
Well, insecurities are the number one relationship killer. They're number one. There is no other reason there's no bigger reason that a relationship won't work is because of that. So if you want to have healthy relationships, you better look at your insecurities. And I'm not saying just go focus on them all the time, but at least be self-aware enough to name them. Like, at least do that. That's a
to
great
claim them. Yeah. And to be vulnerable.
And to be vulnerable about it, to be confident enough to be vulnerable about it. And maybe even doing that doesn't clear things up. But if you continue to be vulnerable about it, eventually you will clear it up. You will, because that insecurity won't have any power over you anymore. When you don't name it, when you put yourself in that block of ice, you're just extending the problem. You're stretching it out farther than it needs to be. And that's just about suffering. And you don't have to suffer. You don't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Insecurities I know you were saying it's a relationship killer. Well, it's actually probably the most preventable thing you can do, right? Is by healing it and working on it. Because like, just, from the conversation we had before about in relationship, some of those things that get resolved don't need to exist in the relationship. And I mean, would you say if some of the things that you in your relationship that you're insecure about, if those weren't there, the relationship would be like golden, right?
Right. Yep.
I mean, the relationship is golden. Like we know, you've expressed she's the love of your life, but, it always can be better, right?
It's the number one contributor to any problems that we have. It is the number one contributor from my side.
And I would say most preventable, because they can be resolved. Some things you can't change, like how brilliant or not brilliant you are.
Right.
That's not necessarily changeable.
Right. And,
or like what you look like, you can't really change that much what you look like. Like those are not attractor factors. You can't change that. Right. But insecurities, you can totally change.
You can.
Which is why we're having this conscious conversation, because
Exactly.
we have hope. We have hope in humanity that we can help bring change. And in ourselves, like just let's claim it for ourselves, like change for ourselves.
Yeah.
And first for ourselves and then for others,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, let's give a big hug. Big hug.
Yeah, big virtual. We made it through it, Gib. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Come here. Everybody's listening. I'm virtually hugging you right now.
We've got our arms out, and he's in Austin. I'm in Houston. And we are hugging the world.
Yep.
Giving the world a big bear hug. Right?
Yep. Big bear hug.
Awesome. Okay. So that is a wrap, right? We're good. And is there any final thing you need to say goodbye to our listeners?
I just want to tell everyone, thank you for listening to the podcast today. I think it's amazing that you're willing to listen to this topic, that you have the bravery to do it, because facing your insecurities is being brave. Naming them is bravery. Hiding them is not.
Yes, courage. The word that comes to mind for me is courage. The courage to face it. And I just want to wrap it up by saying, when you do this, you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for the other people. They're just the beneficiary of the experience. And your life is going to be so much better. As you ask yourself, what is the key to happiness? This is one of the keys to happiness, because it creates major freedom.
Right.
And I mean, I could just see you're lit up. You're so lit up. Like you are so glad that this topic is over. But it's been a lesson for us all. And it's a tough conversation. And actually, I think Gib and I get most lit up on the tough conversations, because it's like an achievement. We made it to the we made it to the peak at the top of
Climbed
the
up the
mountain.
mountain. Yep.
We climbed up a mountain, and it's all downhill from there. Right.
Exactly.
So anyway, everybody, we wish you the best. We hope the best for you. We do these because we live the experiences, and we want to share in hopes of helping other people who are going through any kind of a challenge in their lives to feel like they're not alone out there. So thank you for listening. And until we come up with our next conscious conversation, we will hopefully see you soon. And feel free to email us at info@onenessjunkie.com and give us your ideas and your thoughts on if there's any topics you would like for us to talk about. And we can try to muster up some dialogue around that.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Have a beautiful day.
Yes. And thank you, Gib, for your willingness to muddle through this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Lydia.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
We've reached the end of this episode. If you'd like to continue with this inspirational journey, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. If you are a self-proclaimed oneness junkie, get yourself a t-shirt and spread the message of oneness in your community. And finally, if you have a story to share or know someone that should be a guest on this podcast, contact us at onenessjunkie.com. See you next time. And remember, when we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Compassion starts with you and me.